A genius father who spent half his life struggling to rise through the ranks suddenly discovers that his useless son, a man who previously spent his days squandering wealth in brothels, is actually the only innate expert in the entire city, capable of mastering any martial technique instantly. Not only does he learn these techniques upon first glance, but he can even deduce entire new chapters from fragmented and incomplete manuals. It would be truly marvelous to find someone to spar with and loosen these tired limbs. This is simply because, after transmigrating here, I discovered something extraordinary. As long as someone dies within a 30-meter radius of me, I can absorb and convert their cultivation at the very moment of their demise to grow stronger, gathering the hard-earned cultivation of others the instant they perish, a timely windfall. I have already secured a position as a prison guard. Watching the prisoners in the dungeon draw their final breaths, I originally intended to keep a low profile and quietly harvest their cultivation to consolidate my own strength. Yet today the old man has come knocking at my door. Did I not send word for you to return early? I have warned you long ago. If you lack talent, then focus your efforts on managing the family business. This lowly position as a prison guard, hiding away in such a filthy place all day, is it not enough to disgrace the Su family name? In a few days, resign immediately and report to our merchant firm to serve as a manager. Hearing this, I furrowed my brow. Is working as a merchant firm manager truly considered a promising future? Can it even compare to being an official of the imperial court? In truth, what does my future matter to him? My father has never cared. His insistence that I change professions is merely to preserve the family's face. Had this been the past, I might have obeyed his orders without question. But today, perhaps because I have gained significant cultivation, and my internal strength has surged by 2 full ranks, I find myself feeling a bit more emboldened. I lifted my head and looked straight at Suyoshan. Father, I find working at the city guard station quite suitable. After all, in 2 months I am to be married into the Prince of Jing'an's estate as a son-in-law anyway. Status and prospects to me are not that important. Suyoshan's gaze darkened. Are you questioning my decision? I dare not. I lowered my head once more. With a blank expression, I thought, forget it, my strength is not yet sufficient. I shall endure for a few more days. From childhood until now, my father's eyes have only ever held my elder brother. He only deigned to groom my brother while I, the second spawn of a concubine, was treated as if I were nothing more than thin air. Every time Suyoshan looked at me, his eyes were filled only with indifference and disgust. I am a son of a concubine, my talent is mediocre, and my birth mother was a demonic woman from the nether sect of the northern wilderness. Most importantly, I have personally witnessed the most cowardly moment of Suyoshan's entire life. When I was 6 years old, I watched with my own eyes as a 5-man squad of the demon suppression guards in iron armor stormed into our backyard and struck my mother down with their blades. As a demon suppression guard himself, Suyoshan merely stood by with arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with the cold indifference of an outsider. Those guards even directed their killing intent toward me, a mere 6-year-old child, and my younger sister Su Ling, who was still in her infancy. Had it not been for our grandfather, who arrived just in time to strike down those guards with a single sword, I likely would have perished at the age of 6 in this lifetime. From that day forth, Suyoshan withdrew from the demon suppression guard, his path severed, harboring nothing but bitter resentment in his heart. This incident caused the father-son relationship between the two of them to turn as cold as ice. Every time I encountered Suyoshan, I could read the profound loathing etched into his eyes, and deep within my own heart I harbored that very same disdain for him. Whenever he appeared, I felt a sense of suffocating agitation. Thus, regarding the matter of marrying into the Jing'an prince's mansion and finally escaping Suyoshan's shadow, I did not feel the slightest resistance that the outside world assumed I would. At this very moment, the father and son in the study once again descended into a suffocating, frigid silence. After a long, heavy pause, Suyoshan spoke. Earlier, a visitor arrived from the Immortal Sect. The visitor was an intersect disciple of the King Yun sect, possessing an incredibly noble status. He wishes for our Su family to assist him in completing a task, and this matter requires you to handle it personally. What matter? Is it true that in your prison you are currently holding a young man named Su Wuyin? I nodded. That is indeed true. The people from the Qingyun sect want Su Wuyin to perish in the prison without a soul knowing. Hearing this, my expression shifted slightly. Although I also found this Su Wuyin quite eyesore, I had never dared to consider the act of murder. Although I have grown to this age and participated in many actual battles, I have only ever slain wild beasts in the wilderness, and have never personally taken a human life. I asked in confusion, what is the background of this Su Wuyin? How did he form a grudge with a disciple of the Qingyun sect? Suyoshan raised an eyebrow. That is not something you need to know. You only need to obey and follow orders. I felt irritation rising within me. Striving to suppress my temper, I spoke in a calm tone. Father, I fear this will not be easily accomplished. Although Su Wuyin was apprehended for offending the Prince of Jing'an's heir, the magistrate of the City Patrol Bureau appears to have a significant relationship with him. He has secretly ordered his subordinates to look after Su Wuyin. Given the current situation, at most, we can only detain for a few days to preserve the dignity of the prince's heir before releasing him. If we take his life within the prison once the matter is exposed, not to mention whether the power backing Su Wuyin will sit idly by, I fear that even Lord Situo would never dream of letting us off the hook. By then, the Shou family would likely face a catastrophic disaster. As for the Thanvan sect, I am afraid we cannot rely on them in the slightest. Lord Situo of the City Guard is a first-rank martial artist who has long enjoyed a formidable reputation. His strength in Thuonglan City is undeniably second to none. He is a figure of such prominence that he stands among the top 3 within this entire northern district. Even at the height of our golden age, the Shou family could never hope to withstand the wrath of a first-rank expert. Of course, the most critical point is that once this matter is exposed, you will be the first to suffer the consequences. Not only will your livelihood be shattered, but your very life may not be spared. Despite my meticulous analysis, Shok-sun remained completely unmoved. He turned a cold, piercing gaze toward me and stated, "It is not your place to interfere in such matters, just ensure you fulfill your own duties. No matter how difficult this task may be, I grant you only 3 days to complete it. If the mission remains unaccomplished after 3 days, the family laws will be applied accordingly. Naturally, I will not force you to bear this burden entirely alone. After all, you lack the capability to handle such a feat by yourself. I shall assign manpower to stand by your side and assist you. Now withdraw." Outside, the lamps were just being lit, and a silent crescent moon hung suspended in the distant horizon. I tilted my head to gaze at the moon and let out a long, weary sigh. I have long since grown profoundly weary of Shonyak-sun. To some, he may appear as a benevolent patriarch, fair, impartial, and deeply devoted to the family. But in my eyes, he is nothing more than a cold-blooded schemer who would stop at nothing to achieve his ends. The title of father in this life has brought me nothing but torment and humiliation, and a hatred that is etched deep into my very bones. Back when I first nodded an agreement to become a son-in-law, many of the family elders vehemently opposed the idea. They argued that everyone knows a man living as a son-in-law in his wife's house has no days of peace. It is a life where one finds it impossible to ever hold their head high. Even being the son-in-law of a prince's manor is hardly a position of dignity. Only Shonyak-sun insisted on the arrangement above all else. Not only did he use the influence of the Tinin prince's manor to repel our enemies, but he also seized the opportunity to shamelessly demand a fortune in cultivation resources as a betrothal gift, selling. In my memories, although my mother originated from the demonic sect, she remained deeply devoted and loyal to her husband, and she cherished her children, never once staining her hands with heinous deeds. Yet in the end, she was left to perish in solitude and isolation right before the eyes of the one she loved most. What right does a man like him have to call himself a husband or a father? Fortunately, I have already successfully absorbed the cultivation base of the Tao bead, and I must grow stronger, becoming sufficiently powerful, strong enough that I am no longer at the mercy of his whims. I will force him to kneel before the grave of that pitiful woman and repent until his final breath. That day is certainly not far off. I clenched my fists tightly, my gaze resolute and cold. Afterwards, I headed to the stables to feed the donkey. Then, I took advantage of the darkness to ride the donkey out of the estate. Under normal circumstances at this hour, I would surely have retreated to the back garden to practice martial arts. But now that I possess the cultivation of the Tao bead, I can set aside my training for a while. Venturing out to scavenge for cultivation is the true path. Whether it is the pressure from my father or the lurking dangers, everything makes me acutely aware that my own strength remains far too fragile. It is still far from sufficient. I must strive even harder. Within the city, lanterns were lit in every home. The lights on the main thoroughfare were dim and flickering, with only a few people passing by as I leisurely rode my donkey. From the moment I left the estate, my entire being felt relaxed and at ease. However, I have yet to find any leads on how to scavenge for cultivation. This world is in truth not exactly peaceful. Not to mention that human life is cheap as dirt. At the very least, death is a common sight in these parts. Along the way, I caught fleeting glimpses of 2 martial artist corpses. One presumably had met its end due to poison, the other by blade and sword, but unfortunately they had not just recently perished. The bodies were no longer fresh, and I was ultimately helpless to scavenge any cultivation from them. Aside from that, there were several corpses of beggars who had starved to death by the roadside. They were already decaying and were not martial artists, so naturally they held no cultivation for me to collect. It is just my luck that I encounter these grim homicide scenes every few weeks. Yet now that I am consciously seeking them out, they have vanished without a trace, which is truly exasperating. This method of scavenging for cultivation does not seem particularly viable. The major factions within Kanglan City frequently clash and eliminate one another. Every few weeks, the magistrate's office hauls out a group of death row inmates for execution. It is rumored that the mass grave outside the city has become a feeding ground that has fattened the local packs of wolves. It seems I am currently lacking a few channels for gathering intelligence. I must be more mindful of this in the future. I took a leisurely stroll, seemingly wandering the streets, while silently mapping out the strategy for my next move. In truth, the most convenient method would be to take up a blade and provide for myself by any means necessary, but I consider myself a youth of 5 virtues, upright, kind, righteous, and filled with benevolence. I have etched a moral boundary in my heart and do not wish to cross it lightly. After all, the very existence of the cultivation bead is already a defiance against the heavens. If I were to abandon all restraint and indulge in reckless slaughter, I would surely descend onto the path of a demonic extremist, and I fear I would truly invite the wrath of the heavenly tribulation. It would be a waste of nature's bounty to be struck down by lightning so easily. I wandered aimlessly through several streets, gradually approaching the entrance of a medical clinic named the Huichun Pavilion. This is the most prestigious medical clinic in Shanglan City. It is also the most expensive and occupies a vast expanse of land. This clinic possesses powerful backing and maintains a strict policy of fixed pricing, absolutely refusing to treat the impoverished. If one lacks the coin, even if they were to perish right before the clinic's doors, the staff would not spare them so much as a glance. Though dusk had already fallen, there were still people stationed at the entrance waiting for medical attention, among them a patient lying on a stretcher. Judging by his attire, he appeared to be a martial artist, clearly on the verge of breathing his last. This sight immediately piqued my interest. Beside the stretcher, a burly youth clutching a long saber roared out, "Manager Mo, I am Chu Mang of the Iron Blade Society. Our leader has been struck in the chest by a blade and requires urgent treatment. I beg you, Manager Mo, out of respect for the Iron Blade Society, please treat our leader first. I would be eternally grateful." From within the clinic, a cold, disdainful snort echoed out. "What of the Iron Blade Society? You are merely a crumbling third-rate gang. Even if your sectmaster were to show his face here, he would still have to obediently wait in line. If you truly cannot wait, then cough up 100 taels of silver as an emergency fee, and I may make an exception to treat you first." Chu Mang was so furious that his hands clenched tightly, his veins bulging and twitching incessantly, yet he remained utterly helpless. 100 taels of silver, this was no small sum. Chu Man had been drifting through the gangs for only a few years, living life on the edge of a blade, walking the line between life and death. Although he earned a decent living, he was a martial artist focused on external cultivation, a path that was notoriously expensive. Every scrap of silver he earned was poured directly into his training. Even after a year of bitter toil, he could barely save a few loose coins. Now that he was short on funds, he could only wait in silence for a turn of fortune. As Chuman waited, I too waited with equal anticipation. Perched upon my donkey by the roadside, just a few dozen paces away, I unhooked my wine gourd. I sipped leisurely, biding my time while waiting to harvest cultivation. Perhaps this approach was slightly lacking in moral integrity. But in this world we judge by deeds, not by one's inner heart. I was not committing any evil. I was merely gathering the essence others had discarded. Surely that is not too excessive? With this thought, my heart was at ease. Persistence is the key to carving iron into a needle. Half an hour later, it was nearly Chu Man's turn to be examined at the clinic, yet the man lying on the stretcher breathed his last. His eyes rolled back as he met his end. Boss, wake up. Boss Mo, hold on. It is almost your turn. Boss Mo has passed on. It is all the fault of this wretched clinic. They possess not a shred of humanity. Those following Chuman erupted into cries of sorrow and righteous indignation, while simultaneously hurling profanities at the clinic without restraint. Witnessing this scene, I could not help but shake my head, feeling a stir of melancholic sympathy. Heavens, the martial world is a treacherous path indeed. It is never easy to survive. By comparison, my position as a humble jailer, though lacking any grand future, at least provided safety and stability. The salary and benefits were adequate, and there were always extra tips to be earned on the side. At that very moment, a realization surfaced in my mind. I had gained 19 years of cultivation. 19 years of cultivation, to think the deceased was actually such a formidable expert. This was truly a windfall. Joy surged within me, though I kept my expression composed. I immediately added it to my iron fist technique. In an instant, visions of cultivation flooded my mind. As surging waves of blood chi coursed through every corner of my meridians, my bones and marrow were tempered while my aura surged forward with unprecedented momentum. Simultaneously, countless insights regarding cultivation manifested within my mind, greatly enriching my hard-earned experience. By the 1st, 5th, and 7th years, I had refined the Iron Fist technique to the 5th level, elevating my strength to the 5th rank and granting me the power of 1,000 caddies. In the 10th, 15th, and 19th years, I successfully completed the 6th level of the Iron Fist mental cultivation method. My strength broke through the threshold of the 4th rank. As a martial artist of this caliber, I possessed the immense force of 1,000 caddies. The blood energy within me surged like a rising tide. It felt as though a boundless, inexhaustible power was erupting from within. My body felt as fierce and untamed as a primeval beast. I opened my eyes and a gust of wind erupted before me, stirred by the sheer force of my presence. It blew with such intensity that a sapling several meters away swayed violently. Both my physical form and my soul had achieved a state of harmonious enhancement. My senses were sharpened, and my mind felt preternaturally clear and focused. Truly, this was an unparalleled strength I had never known before. I even developed a faint sensation that I could command and influence all living things. Meanwhile, the effective range of my cultivation bead expanded to 90 meters. While I leaped with joy, I could not help but feel a touch of melancholy. 18 years of age plus 9 years plus another 19 years. In other words, had it not been for the cultivation bead, I would have likely had to wait until the age of 46 before I could even hope to reach the 4th rank. But that is merely a theoretical projection. The reality of the world would never allow for such a feat. Because as a general rule, once a martial artist passes the age of 40, their blood energy begins to decline rapidly. Unless one consumes legendary medicinal elixirs, maintaining one's vitality without it withering away is already a stroke of immense good fortune. Advancing any further at that stage is a near impossible task. This means that if not for the protection of the cultivation bead, with my mediocre talent I would struggle my entire life and still never reach the 4th rank. Fortunately, with the cultivation bead by my side, I can compensate for a lack of innate talent with pure cultivation. There is nothing left to worry about. I could not help but beam with pride. Being at the 4th rank, I was now only a single level away from my father, Chu Yoshan. At this level of mastery, one is considered a genuine expert within the confines of Kanglan City. Once I reach a point where I no longer fear the 7 great experts of the region, I will be able to walk through Kanglan City with my head held high, beholden to no one. At this very moment, even the air around me felt more refreshing and vivid than ever before. I even found myself yearning for an opponent to loosen my limbs, yet in my heart I knew the truth clearly. A 4th-rank martial artist sounds formidable enough, but he is still a long way from having the strength to dictate the fate of others. After drifting in such a state for a while, I hastily suppressed this burgeoning arrogance. Just then, I realized that Chuman and his 2 remaining companions were still rooted to the spot, refusing to leave, seemingly embroiled in a heated dispute over whether they should seek blood vengeance for their fallen leader. Chuman stared with bloodshot eyes, shouting until his voice grew hoarse. "Jiao Wu, Sun Bao, look into your own hearts and answer me. How has our leader treated you both over these past years? Has he ever allowed either of you to suffer the slightest injustice? Jiao Wu, years ago when your mother was on the brink of death, who sold his own ancestral blade to scrape together the funds for her medical treatment. Sun Bao, during that life-and-death struggle at Black Sand Pass last year, who took the lethal blow intended for you upon his own back. Was it not Leader Wu who ended up bedridden for 3 months recovering from those wounds? Now that Leader Wu has met such a tragic end, if we his brothers stand idly by and ignore the debt of blood owed to him, then do we even have the right to stand tall and call ourselves men?" Jiao Hu and Sun Bao were shamed to the point of turning beet red, appearing as if they wished for the ground to swallow them whole. Yet their resolve had not been completely broken. Jiao Hu stared back steadily, his voice a low, gravelly growl as he retorted to Chuman. "Third brother, there is no need to question his righteousness as a leader. If there were even a glimmer of hope, I would of course wish to wash away his grievances with blood. But with just the few of us, how can we possibly hope to contend with the poisonous scorpion Le Tianhun? Even Leader Wu himself was no match for Le Tian. Even if the 3 of us joined forces, could we truly hope to push back Le Tianhun and his pack of underlings? We are not seeking justice. We are merely hurling ourselves toward our own destruction. Do you understand what seeking death truly means? None of us fear losing our lives. But if we perish, who will look after my mother or your sister, and how will they survive the days to come?" Sun Bao sobbed uncontrollably, following suit in his distress. "That's right, third brother, please reconsider. This debt of blood is not one we can recover. Le Tianhun treats human lives like blades of grass, and everyone who has foolishly picked up a sword to seek vengeance against him has already perished." Chuman was so overcome with fury that his face twisted with the malice of a demon. He slashed his blade frantically into the air, venting his rage. With his fury surging to the heavens, he roared, "You are nothing but a pack of spineless cowards. I, Chuman, hereby sever all ties. I have no desire for brothers as eyesores like you." At this very moment, an unfamiliar voice suddenly cut through the air, drawing the attention of all 3 men. "I believe this brother Chuman speaks a great deal of sense. Brother Wu treated you with such deep loyalty and righteousness. This blood feud must be avenged, and it must be done this very night. A true gentleman settles his scores when they are owed. How could one possibly let such a grievance linger until the dawn?" The 3 men turned their heads in astonishment, only to see a handsome, refined youth riding leisurely upon a donkey. They exchanged bewildered glances, signaling to one another that none of them recognized this newcomer. Jiao Hu's expression darkened as he barked in interrogation. "Who are you, brat? Is it your turn to raise your voice and meddle in our affairs?" Unsurprisingly, the one who just spoke so abruptly is none other than myself. I sat perched atop my donkey with a majestic and imposing air, casting a condescending gaze over Jiao Hu and Sun Bao. Assuming the posture of a righteous hero, I spoke clearly. It matters not who I am. As the saying goes, when one encounters an injustice, one must draw their blade to assist. Witnessing such unrighteousness, it is only natural to speak out. I have overheard everything from the start. The late Brother Wu was a fine leader to you all, as well as a loyal sworn brother. Now that he has died such a tragic death, if you cower and refuse to seek vengeance, you are being disloyal to your leader and unrighteous to your brothers. To such dregs of society who lack loyalty and honor, I have held a deep-seated hatred my entire life. Consider this a stroke of luck, for the night is dark, the path is slick, and the light is dim. Had this occurred in the light of day, every last one of you who lacks loyalty and honor, I would strike down individually or crush in pairs. My demeanor was fierce, filled with an aura that reached the heavens. I feigned a casual indifference, tapping the long blade dangling at my hip. I leveraged the situation to project an image of power, warning them that I was not to be trifled with. It would be best if you did not act rashly. The faces of Jiao Hu and Sun Bao twisted with a mix of shame and awkwardness, a truly unsightly expression. At the same time, their eyes were filled with simmering rage as they glared at me. Were it not for the fact that they perceived me as a difficult opponent, these 2 would have surely rushed. That is well said. Chuman, finding these words agreeable, felt a surge of excitement and roared in approval. He stepped forward and performed a formal salute. With a voice like rolling thunder, he declared, "Brother, based on those words alone, I, Chuman, acknowledge you. I am certain we shall be friends. Should we meet again, seek me out at the Tai Ren Cliff in the western city. Feel free to call out my name Chuman whenever you arrive." I felt the corner of my mouth twitch slightly. Is there anyone who has lived to this age and does not know the reputation of Tai Ren Cliff? Even if one were to visit a few times, what sort of disaster could it possibly invite? Brother Ben is too polite. I bowed my head and cupped my hands in a feigned return of the salute. In truth, I had no desire to fraternize with a street thug. My primary goal was merely to manipulate these men into showing a bit of loyalty. and perhaps while I was at it, harvest a bit of cultivation base. Le Tianhun is the leader of the Dujie gang, the most formidable force within the inner city. He specializes in bullying the common folk, coercing the innocent, and bringing tragedy to countless families. I cleared my throat and continued with a tone of righteous sincerity, Brother Mon, and you two brothers as well. Listening to your discussion earlier, it seems the one who took Old Master Ngo's life possesses profound strength, is that correct? Chuman let out a heavy, sorrowful sigh. That is indeed the case. The enemy who killed our boss is Le Tianhun, the hall master of the Dujie gang. Truth be told, we are no match for him. However, this blood debt is one that I, Chumong, am determined to settle, even if it costs me my life. I nodded in deep agreement, rubbing my chin in contemplation as I spoke. Brother Mon, this blood debt must indeed be repaid. However, one must be strategic and weigh their options carefully. Furthermore, to exact revenge, one does not necessarily have to strike directly at the enemy himself. As long as you inflict agonizing suffering upon him, it can be considered a form of vengeance, can it not? For instance, slaughtering Le Tianhun's favorite hound or instigating others to strike on your behalf. As a model youth filled with kindness and compassion, I felt somewhat embarrassed to utter such words. Yet, how could they ignore the brilliance of my suggestion? The eyes of Chumon's group suddenly shone with a radiance like stars, as if they had just discovered a new horizon. Zhao Hu's eyes grew fierce, his teeth grinding as he spoke. How could slaughtering a dog be considered revenge? Besides, I have never heard that Le Tianhun keeps a dog. We could just as easily capture Le Tianhun's entire household. Capture all of his brothers and subordinates. The private residence of Le Tianhun is not far from here. We shall charge straight in and apprehend his concubines and children. I refuse to believe he won't be devastated by that. Zun Bao clapped his hands in approval. A brilliant plan. Le Tianhun has an only son whom he spoils to the heavens. Though young in age, the boy has already claimed many lives. As long as we seize that brat, it will surely make Le Tianhun suffer the despair of a broken lineage, a fate worse than death. The three brothers exchanged words, and in a heartbeat, they drafted their tactical plan and immediately set it into motion. As they departed, Jumeng turned to me and clasped his hands. Brother, we are off to seek our vengeance. I hope we may meet again. Please, feel free to proceed with confidence. I wish to follow and witness your heroic act of retribution firsthand. Very well, little brother. If you do not fear being implicated, you may follow. We shall take our leave. Zhu Meng's mind was flooded with thoughts of slaughter and destruction, so he did not hesitate. He and his two brothers shouldered their long blades and the stretcher carrying the corpse. Looking heroic and imposing as they disappeared down the end of the street, I joyfully urged my donkey forward, intending to keep my distance and follow. Having exhausted so much effort and persuasion, it was finally time for the harvest. Regardless of who died, I had to collect their cultivation. But just then, I had a sudden premonition. To my head to look back, I saw that from some unknown moment, an elderly man with a goat-like beard and a cunning face was leaning against the doorway of the apothecary, casting a look at me that held a mocking, enigmatic smile. Young man, you are truly the type to stir up trouble just to watch the spectacle, but this trick of inciting others to settle scores for you is hardly the conduct of a gentleman. The old man said with a sinister laugh, and I curled my lip in retaliation. Old man, a physician as unscrupulous and money-hungry as you, do you not feel shame in criticizing me? The old man laughed coldly and with disdain. Are you not afraid that this old man will report your every move to Le Tianhun? I felt no fear at all, letting the aura of a fourth-grade master erupt from me. He who plays with fire is bound to be burned. Are you not afraid that a single spark might reduce your humble clinic to ashes? Enough arrogance. Get out of here. The old man's expression darkened, his pupils constricted with a flash of apprehension, and he sullenly turned back into the building. I looked up at the sign of the apothecary and laughed heartily, then spurred my donkey to chase after the three brothers of the Zhu family. It was clear that this greedy old man wanted to extort me, but it is a pity he chose the wrong target. Setting aside whether Le Tianhun is capable of provoking Chu or not, I personally have no fear of him. My strength has surged, and my heart is brimming with confidence. If Le Tianhun does not come to trouble me, that is one thing, but if he dares to provoke me, I will beat him until he is nothing more than a crushed carcass. I would be ridding the people of a plague, while conveniently reaping his cultivation base. I might as well finish off the rest of this black-hearted gang while I am at it. Who knows, there may be more cultivation to harvest from them as well. While I have no desire to slaughter the innocent, it is an entirely different matter when others are determined to ride roughshod over me. Following this, the three brothers Chumon carried the corpse of Boss and Go home before rushing toward an alley in the West City. Within this alley stood a sizable courtyard which served as the residence for the family of Le Tianhun. Very quickly, chaos erupted within the small courtyard. Terrified screams and desperate cries for mercy echoed through the night sky. Are they really this ferocious? From the shadows of the alley, I felt a cold sweat break out. Truth be told, although I have been in this world for 18 years, I still struggle to adapt to its ruthless rhythm. It cannot be helped. My heart has always been inclined toward kindness, and I've always preferred to view the world through a lens of optimism. However, the reality of this world is far more cruel than I ever imagined. Heavens, I must adapt to it, or sooner or later I will be cast aside. This is not a matter of strength, it is a matter of state of mind. I pondered for a moment before dismounting, vaulting onto a 3-meter-high wall in a single leap, standing above to look down at the carnage in the courtyard. I intended to experience this immersion for myself, and while I was at it, draw closer so I would not miss out on any cultivation gains. The household had many members, including men and women, maids and servants, as well as quite a few sturdy guards. Among them were martial artists with extraordinary skills, possessing calm auras and agile movements. They were clearly no pushovers, but the trio of Chuman and Trio Bao were no ordinary men either. Chuman was a 7th rank martial artist, while Trio Ho and Tan Bao were both 8th rank. In the lowest circles of the pugilistic world, they were already considered experts, and very quickly they slaughtered their way through Le Tianhun's home. The scene was somewhat difficult to look upon. However, I felt little emotion, and the mercy in my heart was pitifully scarce. Le Tianhun was notoriously wicked, his infamous reputation preceding him, having caused countless families to be shattered and homes destroyed. At the same time, I continuously gained flashes of insight, receiving 1 year of cultivation, 5 years of cultivation, and 7 years of cultivation. A moment later, the commotion in the courtyard gradually subsided. Glancing at the cultivation orb, I had gathered a full 36 years of cultivation, truly a harvest of unprecedented proportions. Just then, a piercing metallic whistle echoed from the eastern night sky, followed immediately by the sound of more whistles rushing toward the source. From many directions, answering echoes resonated through the air. The situation had turned dire. It was the patrolmen of the Junya division. They were closing in. I hurriedly leaped from the high wall, mounted my donkey, and bolted toward the end of the alley. Although I am also a member of the City Watch, this situation was clearly not the time for an encounter with my colleagues. My figure vanished rapidly into the shadows of the night. However, after riding wildly through several streets, I began to sense a growing unease, as I had failed to escape the patrol net cast by the guards, especially in the dead of night, where pedestrians were sparse and those riding donkeys or horses were even rarer. Just then, a bustling tavern by the roadside caught my eye. This was a place of pleasure and indulgence known as the Zui Xiang Pavilion. The guests coming and going were not the impoverished, but those of great wealth. Luxurious carriages passed by in a constant stream, creating a lively atmosphere. After a moment of hesitation, I dismounted and led the donkey toward the entrance. Although I rode a donkey and appeared somewhat humble, my tall, handsome frame, combined with the stern authority, tempered by my time in the dungeons, meant that no one dared to show me disrespect. The gazes of the beautiful maidens grew even more lingering. They had been eyeing us from afar, and as soon as I arrived at the door, a servant immediately stepped forward to take the donkey. At the same time, an elegant and graceful mature woman stepped forward to welcome me. "This young master is truly handsome, please come inside. Do you have any young ladies in mind? I am new here and inexperienced in the ways of the world, so I am not yet acquainted with anyone." I smiled shyly. I had never visited such a place before, but even if I had never eaten pork, had I not at least seen a pig run? Feeling slightly impatient, I handed over 10 taels of silver as a tip and was led by a maid into a private room. I spent an additional 20 taels of silver to order a spread of wine and meat, and requested a refined courtesan skilled in playing the zither. The courtesan was not of great age. Her beauty was not lacking, and her skills were quite impressive. She played 3 melodies for me before bowing out, leaving me alone to enjoy my food and drink to my heart's content. As a young man on the verge of taking a wife, I had no intention of indulging in excess here. Shortly after having finished my meal, I barred the doors and began my arduous path to increase my cultivation. I wondered how many ranks my cultivation would rise with 36 years of refinement. Immediately, the cultivation runes began to flicker, and a massive surge of life force erupted, surging violently through my limbs and meridians. In the first year, the bottleneck remained unyielding. By the 10th year, I could not help but wonder, am I truly a good-for-nothing? In the 24th year, I finally achieved a breakthrough in the 7th level of the Profound Iron Manual. Countless meridians within my body opened one after another, as flows of true chi cleared my hundreds of meridians, allowing me to completely shatter the bottleneck. I had officially ascended to a 3rd-rank martial artist. The remaining 12 years of cultivation helped stabilize my realm at the peak of the 3rd rank. The 4th rank and 3rd rank represent a massive divide for a martial artist. Below the 4th rank, one focuses on tempering bones and marrow to refine internal strength. Combat methods remain largely restricted to close quarters grappling. From the 3rd rank onwards, one cultivates internal energy, also known as true chi. The true chi of a martial artist can be soft or hard. Soft as willow silk, hard as a divine weapon. Some forms of true chi even contain unique attributes such as fire poison, frost poison, or corrosive lightning, which can grant enhanced lethality against an enemy, allowing for both melee and ranged combat. These diverse combat methods are enough to exert absolute suppression over any martial artist below the 3rd rank. I snapped my eyes open, eager to experience my newfound strength, but my expression gradually turned strange, appearing deeply perplexed and confused. My grandfather was once a great 2nd-rank expert, and he had often recounted his experiences of the internal chi stage to me, but I realized that my current state was vastly different from what he had described. Truly, a mist as small as a hair could lead to a difference of 1,000 miles. Although I had cleared my meridians and possessed true chi, I had not opened my Dantian chi si. Instead, my true chi resided within my bones, flesh, and blood, or more accurately, it was hidden within every single cell of my body. Furthermore, while experts of the internal chi stage possess heightened senses, being able to track positions by the sound of the wind, I discovered that I could do far more than that. Even with my eyes closed, I could perceive everything within a radius of a dozen meters, as if even walls were powerless to obstruct my vision. It was truly miraculous. I realized this was due to my mental energy being so vast that it had manifested outside my body as divine sense. But was divine sense not an exclusive privilege of those who walk the path of immortality? I pondered for a moment, suddenly recalling the origins of the Xuantiaquan. The superior martial arts of the Chu family originally consisted only of the ancestral Baihu Xuanjing. This Xuantiaquan was brought into the Chu family by my mother, who hailed from the Yu Ming sect in the northern wilderness. Therefore, it would be no error to label the Xuantiaquan as a demonic art. Yet fortunately my cultivation has proceeded smoothly thus far, and I have never felt the slightest discomfort. On the contrary, it feels as though it is opening the doors to a new world for me, fueling my thirst to pursue the pinnacle of martial Tao. I opened my palm and gently released my internal energy. A thin, translucent white mist of blood essence rose from my hand and refused to dissipate. I tested it by thrusting a chopstick into this white current. Instantly, the tip of the chopstick was coated in a layer of white frost. The whiteness spread rapidly, covering more than half of the chopstick, until the white energy in my palm vanished completely. I retracted my true energy, picked up the chopstick, and examined it from every angle. I realized that this wooden chopstick had suddenly become remarkably heavy, and when I tapped it, it emitted a crisp, resonant chime, as if it had been transformed into solid jade. I applied only a slight amount of force to snap it. With a sharp crack, the chopstick shattered cleanly, with stone-like dust falling from the break. My eyes narrowed, and I instinctively drew a chilling breath, feeling both exhilarated and unsettled. This is petrification. My true energy carries an inherent attribute, and a petrification effect at that. This is truly heaven-defying. If this were to strike an opponent's body, who could possibly withstand it? I felt even more deeply that the Xuantiaquan was immensely powerful, far beyond the reach of any ordinary cultivation technique. One must understand that the elemental attribute of true energy is a vital metric in determining the grade of a technique. If this were utilized in actual combat against another, a single strike would turn the enemy into a stone statue in the blink of an eye. The mere thought of it is spine-chilling, yet it is undeniably exhilarating. Furthermore, I soon discovered as I circulate my cultivation technique, my body emanates a powerful gravitational force. If I were to accelerate the flow and concentrate this suction into my palm, the resulting destructive power would surely be terrifying. After hundreds of failed attempts and tireless practice, I slowly began to grasp the secret. In 3 minutes, I could snatch a wine cup from a meter away. In 10 minutes, I could pull a flower pot from 3 meters. And in half an hour, I could draw a broadsword from 8 meters away. After an hour, I was actually able to instantly pull a wooden chair from 10 meters away, drawing it right to my chest. It was truly astonishing. This was essentially the dragon capturing hand. Moreover, this dragon capturing hand technique does not consume even a sliver of internal energy. It is merely a byproduct of the true essence flowing through my body. Combined with my divine sense in the iron ore, it is the manifestation of the dragon capturing hand. This serves as further proof that the profound iron fist is no ordinary technique. In truth, I do not yet realize that the most essential core of the profound iron fist as a demonic art is its ability to devour. When cultivated to the great perfection, one can consume the blood essence and internal energy of an opponent from a distance, absorbing it as one's own. This is the true path to unlocking the power of this demonic art. Yet I have chosen a different path entirely. I transformed this devouring force into a technique for capturing objects, effectively discarding its core functionality without a second thought. Regardless, even if I had realized its true nature, I would no longer have the opportunity to let my cultivation level regress. This breakthrough in cultivation has once again elevated my soul to a new realm. The coverage of my divine sense has now expanded to 120 meters. From here on, gathering cultivation will be an even more leisurely affair. The long night stretches on and I feel no urge to close my eyes. I pour myself a glass of fine wine to enjoy. Both my body and mind are completely relaxed. As I slowly savor the lingering fragrance of the wine, I expand my spiritual energy to observe the intriguing scenery of my neighbors. The gluttonous man in the room to the left is completely intoxicated, being toyed with by 3 young ladies, yet he seems perfectly content. In the room to the right, a handsome young master is examining a gold-plated secret manual under the lamplight. The title of the manual is Void-Shattering Finger. Beside him, a maid disguised as a man keeps him company. Just as I was about to retract my divine sense, the sudden conversation between the young master and the maid caught my attention. I heard the maid whisper, "Young master, do you not usually hold the common martial artists in such low regard? Why would you spend so lavishly to acquire this martial arts manual this time?" The young master smiled faintly, filled with confidence. Though I disdain common martial artists, I have never intended to look down upon the path of martial arts itself. Do you truly grasp the reason why present-day cultivation sects remain perched on high, lording their superiority over the martial arts sects with such arrogance? The maid hesitated for a moment before replying softly, "Is it because martial arts are crude and barbaric, while immortal techniques are subtle and profound?" The young master shook his head with a faint smile. "With such a display of shallow knowledge, your words have barely scratched the surface. The true source lies in the fact that the majority of modern martial arts essence consists of mere fragmented, incomplete scrolls. The rare genuine martial arts manuals, capable of transcending the Jiantian realm and ascending to the peak of the great Tao, have almost all been seized by the immortal sects, systematically destroyed and cast into the obscurities of history. The great war between the immortals and martial artists 1,000 years ago eventually concluded with a hard-fought victory for the Immortal Alliance. Since that day, all immortal sect factions across the realm have made a pact, Any profound martial arts heritage discovered within their territories must be destroyed immediately upon discovery. Any martial artist whose strength surpasses the Xiantian realm must also be eradicated without exception. It is precisely through this thousand-year campaign of relentless suppression that the immortal sects have secured the current era of immortal prosperity and martial decline. This void-shattering finger is a peerless martial arts technique. If anyone were to cultivate it to its full potential, it would undoubtedly pose a significant threat to us cultivators. If I, this young master, were to bring it back to my sect to be destroyed, I would certainly be credited with a monumental contribution to the entire immortal world. So that is the reason. The maid suddenly understood, casting a look of reverence toward the young master, mixed with a hint of bittersweet sorrow. But young master, you spent 6,000 taels of gold just to acquire this manual, to simply destroy it now. Wouldn't that be a terrible waste? The young master smiled indifferently. What is there to waste? These trivial worldly riches are of no consequence to me. Furthermore, how could the rewards bestowed by my sect be compared to a measly few thousand taels of gold? The maid nodded in agreement. Young master, the void-shattering finger has already been collected. The matter of assassinating Su Wuyan has also been entrusted to the Su family in Kanglan City. Then why do we not depart immediately? The handsome young master curled his lips, revealing an enigmatic smile. We cannot set out just yet. Whether it is Su Wuyan or that brat from the Su family, whichever one of them ends up dead, I will be the one to benefit. However, I must still clean up the remaining nuisances afterward to ensure no future calamities arise. Moreover, on this journey down the mountain, I bear another heavy responsibility. Reflecting on this, the young master said no more, casually tossing the manual into an old leather pouch that resembled a scented sachet. At this moment, I swirled my wine cup, a cold glint flashing across my eyes. I had not expected that a simple night of leisure would yield such unimaginable spoils. This individual is likely the inner disciple of the Qingyun sect who has been lingering in the mortal realm. His name must be Xiao Yishan. However, what troubles me most are the earth-shattering ancient secrets and the cunning schemes that Xiao Yishan has unveiled. The martial arts hierarchy spans from the 1st to the 9th grade. Surpassing the 9th grade is the Xiantian realm. As far as I am aware, across the 3,000 miles of the Zhongbei region, the number of 1st-grade martial artists renowned throughout the world barely reaches 5 or 6. Yet Xiantian-level martial artists are nowhere to be found. At the very least, among those known to the public, no one has ever been heard to reach that peak. I had always assumed it was because Xiantian legacy techniques were exceedingly rare, and breaking the bottleneck to enter the Xiantian realm was far too arduous. But now it appears that hidden corners of deep secrets lie behind this. It is truly linked to the struggle for spiritual and martial destiny, as well as the deliberate suppression from the immortal sects. Not to mention, the moment Xiao Yichin mentioned the Chu family, I clearly caught the scent of a sinister conspiracy. Could this Chu family that Xiao Yichin speaks of be my own? Yet he and I have never met, nor do we share any deep-seated hatred. Why would he go to such lengths to plot against me? Although I lack concrete evidence, my intuition tells me otherwise. The Chu family Xiaoqin mentioned is almost certainly mine, because if one counts the individuals directly involved in this matter, it leads back to no one but me. It seems Xiao Yichin intends to silence me once his objective is complete. As for who he plans to silence, one does not need to rack their brain to deduce it. Reflecting on this, a raging fire of fury ignited within my heart. My ancestor once braved life and death for the sake of the Qingyun sect, contributing countless illustrious merits, yet in the end he vanished without a trace during a campaign initiated by the Qingyun sect master, his fate remaining unknown. Later, when the Chu family fell upon hard times, driven to a dead end, we reached out to the Qingyun sect, begging for their protection, yet those people turned a blind eye, acting with utter ruthlessness and cold-heartedness. And now, the Qingyun sect expects to command the Chu family. These people of the immortal sect are truly cold-blooded and ruthless. I sat in silence, lost in thought, a sliver of icy resolve flickering in the depths of my eyes. If I do not stir up chaos tonight, how can I ever swallow this bitterness? Xiao Yichim, since you have plotted against me, do not blame me for being cruel. So what if you are a member of the immortal sect? Tonight, I am determined to measure exactly how much strength this disciple of the immortal sect truly possesses. Xiao Yichen's power is not even slightly evident, nor is his cultivation level capable of being estimated. However, I have trailed him with my divine sense for so long, yet he has not detected me in the slightest. I can surmise that his cultivation is not particularly profound. It is even questionable whether he has truly embarked upon the path of immortality. I drained the wine in my cup, unhooked the long blade from my waist, placed it on the windowsill, and pushed the door open to step outside. Casting a feigned, casual glance around the corridor, I saw two low-level martial artists standing motionless, guarding the entrance to Xiao Yichen's room. They must be his trusted subordinates. I stumbled into the courtyard feigning intoxication, wandering around to carefully assess the terrain. Seeing no one paying attention, I pulled out a black cloth to cover half of my face, then vanished into the shadows in a flash. I moved stealthily along the base of the wall toward the back of the building, and with a swift glance, I located the blade I had left on the second-story windowsill, while simultaneously pinpointing the location of Xiao Yichen's room. Without a moment's hesitation, I gained momentum and began my approach. With a sudden burst of strength, I vaulted 3 or 4 meters into the air, latching onto the ledge of the second-floor window with ease. Smashing the window frame with a single palm strike, I used my formidable spiritual sense to encompass everything within the room. Without needing to peer inside, I reached out and unleashed the Great Absorption technique, drawing everything toward me. A surging violent force erupted outward, causing the leather pouch to suddenly fly up and land precisely into my waiting hand, as I simultaneously dropped, swiftly retreating from the window. Sensing that something was amiss, Xiao Yichen jolted awake in terror. He never expected that in this mundane mortal world, anyone would dare to brazenly snatch a treasure from the hands of an immortal sect disciple like himself. It was truly audacious, a suicidal act. This old leather pouch was no ordinary item. It was a spatial storage artifact of the immortals. It contained his entire fortune, and to have it snatched away like this would be a catastrophic loss for him. He scrambled from his bed, leaping through the air in a single bound toward the window. I thrust a palm toward the dark silhouette outside the window. Instantly, a deep blue palm imprint condensed, tearing through the air with piercing speed. The frigid aura emanating from the imprint alone was enough to coat the window in a layer of biting frost. At this moment, I was in freefall outside the window, my gaze calm and indifferent as the fossilized chi within my body surged wildly. A blinding white light flashed upon my fist, and I unleashed a fierce punch to meet the incoming strike. A dull, heavy explosion echoed through the air, vibrating against the night sky. My goal had been achieved, and I had no intention of prolonging the battle. The moment my feet touched the ground, I utilized astonishing speed to melt into the pitch-black shadows. "Where do you think you're running, petty thief?" Xiao Yishan gritted his teeth, hurriedly clasping his hands together to form a seal, intending to unleash a technique. He had only stepped onto the path of immortality 6 months prior. Having reached the first level of chi refining, he had only mastered a single technique, the elementary stellar flare. This technique could condense a dome of starlight with a diameter of 3 meters. Any mortal body unlucky enough to be trapped within would undoubtedly be incinerated into ashes. Anyone who has not attained the Tao and ascended to immortality would be powerless to resist it. However, due to his lack of experience, Xiao Yichen's execution remained clumsy and unrefined. His first attempt failed entirely. By the time he was prepared to cast the technique a second time, the figure had already fled into the distance, leaving him so furious that he was nearly driven to madness by the humiliation. "You scoundrel, no matter who you are, this young master will surely hunt you down and reduce you to dust." He longed to give chase immediately, but he was clad only in his undergarments, making it highly inconvenient to venture outside. Just then, the chamber door was violently kicked open, and 2 youths rushed in, looking panicked and disheveled. "Senior brother, what happened?" Xiao Yishan barked irritably. "Hurry to the Sihai Inn and report this to my second uncle. My storage ring has been stolen by an intruder." The 2 subordinates turned deathly pale in shock, and hurriedly scrambled out of the room. Xiao Yichan changed his attire with incredible speed before leaping out the window. Yet, the enemy's figure had long since vanished without a trace, and even the connection of his spiritual sense to the storage ring had been completely severed, causing him to cough up blood in his rage. I navigated through the dark alleys, circling a long way around. Only then did I calmly and leisurely make my way back to my own quarters. By now, the area outside was as boisterous and chaotic as a marketplace, though anyone who dared to linger to watch the commotion was blocked by Xiao Yichen's subordinates. The very moment the storage bag settled firmly into my palm, I immediately detected a faint, lingering trace of spiritual consciousness embedded within. Yet, as I projected my own spiritual sense to touch the surface of the bag, it proved effortless, as I easily obliterated the wretched mark hidden inside. Taking advantage of the momentum, it was just as simple for me to imprint my own spiritual signature onto it. With the control of the storage bag secured, I saw no reason to rush into examining its contents immediately. After all, the situation could not yet be considered safe. Shortly thereafter, sounds drifted over from Lu Yu's adjacent room. Xiao Yichen had returned, and he had even brought back a middle-aged cultivator clad in Taoist robes. I vaguely sensed a powerful surging aura erupting from the room next door, a manifestation of spiritual energy distinct to true cultivators, standing a world apart from the aura of a martial artist. This gave me pause, and I dared not act recklessly by probing further with my spiritual sense. Fortunately, my hearing remained sharp. Even through the wall, I could clearly hear the sharp, biting rebukes echoing from the other side. "I had warned you time and time again," the man scolded. "When traveling, one must never be arrogant or careless. Yet in the end, you treated my words as nothing more than a passing breeze. With such pitiful cultivation, what right do you have to act so lawless and look down upon the world?" Faced with the relentless barrage of insults from his second uncle, Xiao Yichen's face turned crimson with shame, yet he could not utter a single word in his defense. Lowering his voice, he urged, "Second uncle, I know my faults, but this is not the time to dwell on such matters. The most urgent task now is to quickly track down my stolen storage bag. The Kingling Gold Sword and countless hard-earned cultivation resources are all stored within, along with the martial arts manual I had only just acquired at such a high price. The Qingling Gold Sword was a high-grade treasure sword bestowed by the ancestors of the Shao family. Its value was immeasurable." He furrowed his brows deep in thought before suggesting a new plan. "Second uncle, we can still utilize the influence of the Su family here in Kanglan City. Though the Su family lacks true elites and formidable experts, they have been firmly rooted in Kanglan City for a century. Perhaps they would be capable of casting a net wide enough to gather the information we need. I have left a lightning prohibition trap within that storage bag. If those thieves dare to lay a finger on the contents, It is sufficient to order the Chu family to closely monitor the movements within the city. The second uncle fell into deep contemplation for a moment, then reluctantly nodded in agreement. The two of them finalized the plan in the blink of an eye, and hurriedly separated to take action. Meanwhile, thanks to my extraordinary hearing, I had swallowed every word of the uncle and nephew's exchange. A faint, indifferent smile played upon the corners of my lips. Xiaochen and Yao Dao believe they have manipulated the Chu family, though it remains unclear what methods he possesses to be so confident in controlling Chu Yoshan. Suddenly, I felt a shiver run down my spine as a ferocious surge of spiritual sense descended from above, scanning every corner of the room and sweeping right over me. I swiftly retracted my aura, feigning a drunken stupor as I slumped onto the floor, snoring loudly while concealing the storage bag beneath my body. That strand of divine sense lingered on me for a few seconds before hastily retreating. I knew full well that this surge of spiritual sense must have originated from Xiao Yichen's second uncle. Judging by the sharpness of that divine sense, it is evident that this individual's strength is not to be underestimated. I had initially intended to slip into another room, but by this time Xiao Yishen and his second uncle had already departed. After reflecting for a moment, I decided it would be pointless to involve myself in further unnecessary matters. I leisurely locked the door and allowed my spiritual sense to permeate the storage bag inside my robes. In an instant, the contents of the storage bag were laid bare within my mind. The spatial dimensions inside this storage bag were cramped, spanning less than 10 cubic feet, no larger than a confined, dilapidated bedroom. Inside were piled a few sets of clothing, several blades and swords, a gold-plated manual, 2 vials of medicinal elixirs, a stack of banknotes, and a small heap of gold and silver, along with a chaotic assortment of miscellaneous items, among which was a piece of yellow jade radiating a mystical aura, appearing to be a legendary jade slip containing records of cultivation techniques. It made my eyes turn red with greed, and there was also a long sword inlaid with dark gold, shimmering with starlight. It looked remarkably imposing and luxurious. Sharp and dazzling, its exterior display was anything but ordinary. Furthermore, there was another strange jade carving the size of a fist, emitting a faint, dim glow. It also appeared to be a treasure of significant value, though I would not rush to examine the other items just yet. The gold and silver alone amounted to 2,000 or 3,000 taels of silver. It was truly a massive windfall. However, I refrained from tampering with the items inside for the time being. After all, Xiao Yichen had hinted earlier that a lethal trap was hidden within, which would detonate instantly if triggered. So I could not afford even the slightest carelessness. I only held the golden manual tenderly in my hands. It was truly priceless, inscribed with the title of an advanced martial arts technique. I am completely unfamiliar with the standards for grading these high-level martial arts. However, the material of this manual is truly extraordinary. The pages are astonishingly durable. At first glance, one can already sense its premium quality. This manual was recently acquired at an auction, and even Xiao Yichen had stopped to examine it earlier. There should be no issues with it. With caution, I gently released my divine sense. While keeping a vigilant watch on my surroundings, I opened the manual. Breaking Void is not only a legendary martial technique from the ancient era, but it also requires the use of true chi to execute. Only martial arts experts at the 3rd rank or above have the qualification to cultivate this technique. In an auction a few days ago, it fetched an astronomical price of 6,000 taels of gold. Its true value likely far exceeds that figure of 6,000 taels. As a martial arts manual, this item is fundamentally different from common treasures. It is not something one can simply purchase with a surplus of wealth. The most important factor remains one's internal cultivation and true strength. Some worldly fools, even if they carried fortunes worth trillions, would not dare to covet such items. It could easily cost them their lives. I carefully studied it for a while. I was soon drawn in by the profound contents within, for cultivating Breaking Void requires a deep foundation of internal energy as a starting point. It necessitates clearing the meridians of the 10 fingers in both arms, totaling 33 primary and secondary meridians. By condensing true chi, one can release arrows, destroying enemies from a distance. Its greatest advantage lies in its lightning-fast speed, wide range, and sharp, piercing destructive power. Upon reaching the entry level, one can release a single finger strike. Within a range of 3 paces, it can effortlessly pierce mortal flesh. At the minor mastery level, one can release a dual finger strike. Within 10 paces, it can easily shatter iron armor. At the major mastery level, one can release 5 consecutive strikes. Its lethal range exceeds 30 paces, and within 20 paces, it can tear through stone and metal with ease. To reach the state of perfection, one must comprehend a trace of the void-breaking intent. At that level, one can release 10 strikes simultaneously. Its lethal range can extend up to 90 paces, and at 50 paces, it can effortlessly pierce through a half-foot thick iron wall. Damnation, this truly is a peerless divine technique. If one could cultivate it to the stage of perfection, firing from all 10 fingers simultaneously with a range exceeding 90 paces, it would be no different from a machine gun. The more I read, the more my blood surged with excitement. I longed to throw myself into training immediately, but unfortunately I had exhausted my store of spirit stones. I obsessively flipped through the pages, engraving every line of its essence deep into my mind. It was not until a long time later that the sound of rhythmic snoring drifted in from the adjacent room. Shaking off my excitement, I blew out the candle, collapsed onto the bed, and fell into a deep slumber. I slept soundly until the sky began to brighten with the early morning mist. Before the sun had even begun to rise, I suddenly remembered that I am, after all, a strapping young man, and if the world were to see me wandering out of a brothel, it would hardly preserve my untarnished reputation. Furthermore, if word were to reach the ears of Princess Wanzhao through prying eyes, it would only invite a fresh entanglement of troubles. By the time I returned to the Su residence, the sun had already leisurely ascended. Xiao Yichen had arrived the night before, and the entire Su household was bustling with uncharacteristic frantic activity. Su Yoshin had not only dispatched a large number of men into the streets, but he was also personally visiting his contacts to inquire and gather information for Xiao Yichen. Regarding this chaotic mess, I remained completely indifferent. I neither interfered nor bothered to get involved. Yesterday I stood clearly within striking distance, yet Xiao Yichen was so blind he failed to detect me. He would likely have to toil for a long time before he could ever uncover that I was the culprit. Taking a step back, even if one day my identity were to be exposed, I would surely have already transcended my current self by then. I sat calmly and leisurely enjoyed my breakfast. Once I had donned my city patrol uniform, I set out to attend to my duties. Moments before I stepped out the door, the steward Suhi pulled me into a discreet corner, pressing a small silver vial into my hand on behalf of my father and offering a series of ceaseless, detailed instructions. Inside the vial was a single drop of a lethal poison, known as 7-kill green wind, a treasure worth 1,000 gold pieces. A single drop vaporizing into the air is enough to claim the lives of everyone in the room. It is colorless. The only drawback is that the duration of the effect is incredibly short. It lasts for merely 30 breaths, not even a full minute. After 30 breaths, the toxins dissipate and vanish completely. All things considered, if one can endure the threshold for a minute without succumbing, they will essentially remain alive and well. I feel that this trinket is a bit volatile. A single moment of carelessness could easily send me to my own early grave. Fortunately, the small vial appears to be hermetically sealed and sturdily crafted. I clicked my tongue, steadied my resolve, and tucked it securely away. I had barely arrived at the yamen when a massive detachment of the city guard came marching into view. From afar, they were escorting a long line of shackled prisoners, dragging them toward the grand prison. Every one of these prisoners had a face beaten to a pulp, looking utterly wretched. I widened my eyes at the line of suspects, unable to help but feel a jolt of shock, wondering what was happening. Why had they swept up such a multitude of people all at once? Old Shu let out a long, weary yawn and offered a bitter, helpless smile. Last night, a manor was bathed in blood and slaughtered. Over 30 lives were lost, and the culprit vanished without leaving a trace. Our superior is absolutely furious. He issued an order to sweep the streets, telling the brothers to round up every last petty hoodlum wandering the city last night. They've detained over 100 people. It looks like we'll be breaking our backs today. I'm just wondering if the empty cells can even hold them all, I replied, feeling somewhat bewildered. The unwritten rule of the city guard is to protect the common folk and suppress those martial artists who act recklessly. They are absolutely forbidden from entangling themselves in the grievances of the Jianghu. Even though the private residence of Le Tianhun was brutally massacred last night with numerous casualties, it was clearly a matter of settling personal vendettas within the martial world. If they had followed the usual practice, the city guard would surely have chosen to turn a blind eye and plug their ears while stealing the bell. They would have just performed a perfunctory show and called it a day. Why did you react with such excessive force this time? At that very moment I froze, recognizing several familiar figures blending into the line of prisoners. Chu Mang, Zhao Hu, and Sun Bao, the trio stood in the line perfectly accounted for without a single one missing. At the same time, the three of them jumped in shock when they saw me dressed in the official attire of the city guard. All three of them stood frozen, their jaws dropping in utter disbelief. The three exchanged glances, their faces twisting in dismay. They were caught between laughter and tears. The young brother who stood up with such righteousness to defend justice last night turned out to be a running dog of the city guard. They were now deeply suspicious that they had been set up and led by the nose the night before. Should I offer a sincere confession to earn leniency, or is there a better path? Truly, this is a difficult dilemma to resolve. Moments later, dozens of jailers rushed in to begin their work. Supported by a formidable reinforcement of blade-wielding guards, we finally succeeded in escorting over 100 prisoners of the Songjia faction into their cells. During the course of this escort, 2 of the gravely injured prisoners perished on the road, bestowing upon me a total of 12 years of cultivation base. This event acted like a potent stimulant, jolting my mind into absolute clarity. I cast a gaze shimmering with a strange, vibrant light, scrutinizing the crowd of prisoners once more. It was as if I were drooling over a vast, untapped gold mine. The prisoners, still dazed and confused, unaware of what had just occurred, instinctively felt a cold chill run down their spines, silently cursing, thinking that this old man must have something wrong with his mind. The grand prison is strictly divided into 6 sectors: Jiayi, Bing, Ding, Wu, and Ji. Each sector possesses over a dozen cells and is clearly assigned to one sector chief, 4 prison guards for strict surveillance, and additional sentries stationed on the perimeter. This batch of prisoners was largely funneled into the Ding sector, which I am responsible for overseeing. Naturally, the 3 brothers of the Chu family were included among them. I skillfully worked the locks while nonchalantly offering a cold lecture. Before today, I had no concept of who you were. Likewise, you knew nothing of who I am. However, starting from this day forward, perhaps we should get to know one another. I am not a person of gentle temperament or easygoing nature. What I despise most is chaos, noise, and filth, so I advise you all to behave, remain docile, and keep your heads down if you wish to survive. Should you defy my will, I will be forced to let you taste the bitterness of regret for the rest of your lives. Following a brief moment of silence, the prisoners inside the cells began their desperate pleas. Master Su, my name is Wang Xiaohu, a young master from the law family. I've truly been implicated in this injustice. I did not participate in any illicit activities last night. I beg you to show mercy and grant me leniency. Please accept these 3 silver coins as a token of my respect and set me free. I humbly implore you, Jailer Su, to show a little leniency and favor. I replied with an indifferent gaze, devoid of any expression. I ignored every cry of innocence. If they offered bribes, I accepted them without hesitation. But if they were arrogant or troublesome, I silenced their defiance with a swift strike from the hilt of my blade. Before long, the pouch at my chest grew heavy with several taels of white silver. These collections were considered legitimate perquisites of the jailer, not a violation of the rules. As long as they behaved and offered their tribute, providing them with minor conveniences within my authority was a simple matter. This was child's play to me. Thus I continued to reap these rewards, entirely untroubled and without a hint of hesitation. A short while later, in the span of merely a single morning, the dungeon reported the expiration of 2 more prisoners. One was a seasoned underworld wanderer who succumbed to the eruption of his injuries, while the other was a notorious merchant known for trafficking contraband and betraying his associates in the black market, who had been interrogated until his gallbladder ruptured, leading to his wretched demise. These 2 individuals had graciously gifted me 11 years of cultivation, adding to the 12 years I had already harvested earlier that morning. The Fajo cultivation base now held a total reserve of 23 years of cultivation. The harvest could only be described as incredibly bountiful. Thanks to this, my mood was exceptionally high. The setting sun cast its light through the cold iron bars, draping a vibrant glow over the damp, moss-covered floor. I sat composedly upon my personal master's chair. In my hand, I gently toyed with that small silver vial worth 1,000 gold pieces. To an observer, I appeared to be merely closing my eyes in quiet meditation. But in truth, I was immersed in calculating the value of the cultivation I had just acquired. For an ordinary mediocre practitioner, 23 years of cultivation would be equivalent to half a lifetime of grueling toil. However, given my current tyrannical strength, it was nothing more than a hearty midday meal. I did not hesitate for a single second. With a mere thought, I channeled all 23 years of cultivation directly into the void-piercing finger technique. Although my black iron fist had yet to reach the pinnacle of perfection, the principle that more wealth does not burden the master was nothing new to me. Furthermore, the black iron fist is a technique for close-quarters combat, whereas the void-piercing finger is a long-range strike. This combination provided a perfect complementary synergy. As the surge of cultivation poured into me, the small figure diligently practicing martial arts in my mind began to move with relentless intensity. In the first year, I knew only the monotonous repetition of stabbing my finger into hard rock. My fingers swelled and throbbed, the very marrow of my bones aching with a rhythmic pulsing pain. By the 10th year, more than half of the meridians in both hands had been opened. Once I pointed my finger, I possessed the ability to gouge a deep hole into a piece of wood 3 meters away. By the 15th year, I finally crossed the threshold of entry. The wind whistling from my fingertip cut like a sharp sword, capable of piercing standard leather armor. By the 23rd year, the void-piercing finger had reached the minor completion stage, and I gained new profound insights into the suppression and eruption of true energy. I suddenly snapped my eyes open, a flash of golden light flickering in the depths of my pupils. As I casually pointed, a faint sound of air being pierced flickered through the void, and in an instant, the sturdy porcelain teacup had been punctured, a clean hole drilled straight through from front to back. The surface of the tea remained smooth as a polished mirror, entirely devoid of any spiderweb fractures. Curiously, not a single drop of tea had spilled despite the violent impact. Is this the true power of spatial piercing? The might of the ancient energy is immeasurable. Such penetrating power, even a martial artist clad in heavy armor would find it difficult to withstand, and that is not even accounting for the added lethality of a sneak attack powered by divine sense. It is truly a divine technique for causing harm. I nodded in satisfaction, casting a glance at the heavens, noting that the sun was still far from setting. I rose to my feet and strode toward the darkest corner of the dungeon. That is where a cell specially designed for high-profile prisoners is hidden, and also the lair of Su Wugen. Before I had even reached the threshold, I could already sense a biting, bone-chilling aura. This man, Su Wugen, is truly no ordinary person. Through the iron bars, I fixed my gaze upon the young man who had forced even the disciples of the Qingyun sect to tread with caution. He wore prison garb stained bright red with flowing blood. His hair was disheveled and matted, and his limbs were shackled in heavy chains as thick as a man's arm. His shoulder blades were pinned firmly against the wall by 2 bone-piercing spikes. To the outside eye, he appeared utterly wretched. Yet he did not groan in agony or plead for mercy like the other inmates. On the contrary, he sat cross-legged, his head bowed, as if he were closing his eyes to calm his heart and restore his spirit. Hearing the sound of my approaching footsteps, Su Wugen slowly raised his head, revealing a face as pale and gaunt as a sheet of paper. His eyes, strangely enough, shimmered with a peculiar and unsettling shade of gray. The moment our gazes met, I felt my divine sense sting with sharp pain, as if pricked by a needle. This caused a surge of wariness to rise within me. If he were to return to the zenith of his prime, I fear I would not necessarily be his match. Su Wugen stared at me for a long time, then suddenly curled his lips to reveal white, withered teeth, chuckling hoarsely. Interesting, truly interesting. A tiny dungeon in Juncheng City, yet it hides a master like you. Your vitality is as fierce as a tiger and as mighty as a dragon, Yet you restrain yourself, hiding your aura as seamlessly as flowing water and drifting clouds. If I did not possess the spirit eye, I would surely have been deceived by your facade. I maintained a stoic expression, gazing at him with complete indifference. Suwugan was not perturbed, continuing in a raspy, jarring voice that grated against the ears. Looking at your appearance, I assume the sectmaster sent you to take my life, did he not? I narrowed my eyes slightly. With a cold, detached tone, I remarked, you seem to have no fear of death whatsoever. Death. A flicker of mockery flashed through Suwukan's eyes. I cultivate the Huangshuan noble path. To me, death is merely a new form of rebirth. As long as my soul does not wither, even if my body decays to nothing but bone, I can possess another and be reborn at any moment. Yet that boy of yours is being used as a mere tool for slaughter, completely blind to the truth. That Xiao Yichen has a narrow and vindictive heart. He is petty and vengeful. He sent you to kill me. In truth, he merely wishes to use my hand to eliminate you, or use your hand to strike me down, only to silence you afterward. No matter the outcome, you cannot escape your inevitable demise. I inwardly scoffed at his words. I understood this truth more than enough. I was even more enlightened on the matter than Su Wuken was, yet I saw no reason to waste my breath on his idle chatter. The eternal rule that villains perish because of their own unloquacity is something I have engraved deep into my heart. I reached into my robe and withdrew a silver vial, shaking it lightly in my hand. This is a lethal poison given to me by my father, known as the Seven-Kill Zephyr. It is said that a single drop is enough to send an entire chamber of people to the afterlife. I wonder, does it have any effect on someone cultivating the path of ghosts such as yourself? Staring intently at the small vial, the composure on Suwuken's face finally flickered with a hint of tension. Seven-Kill Zephyr, that wretched old man Suyueshen, actually dares to use such a devastatingly absolute poison. It seems he has truly resolved to drive me into a corner. However, boy, do you truly dare to unseal it? The Seven-Kill Zephyr is colorless, odorless, and highly volatile. Once the lid is removed, every living thing within a 3-zhang radius will be eradicated without exception. Standing so close, are you not afraid of bringing disaster upon yourself and dying alongside me? The corners of my mouth curled into a mocking smile. Fear, naturally I am afraid. That is precisely why I have proactively prepared a fragile layer of protection. As the words left my lips, the true energy within my body surged and roared to life. A gray radiance erupted instantly, enveloping my entire form in a protective shroud. The surface of my skin shimmered with a metallic stone-like luster. It was the manifestation of the iron body technique, tempered to a profound and formidable realm. Seeing this, the disdain in Suwugan's eyes only grew more intense. Did I truly believe that such mundane martial arts could withstand the corrosive power of the Seven-Kill Green Wind? That was nothing more than a delusional, fevered dream. Boy, if you are so eager to meet the King of Hell, I shall grant your wish. Once your body is consumed by the poison and you ascend, your soul shall serve as nourishment for my demonic arts. I did not waste my breath on a retort. As my fingers brushed against the stopper, ready to unseal the vial, a violent, frantic alarm bells echoed within my mind. This intuition struck without reason, yet it was terrifyingly intense. It felt as if the very moment I lifted the lid, I would be met with a fate of pulverized bones and shattered flesh. My movements halted abruptly. I immediately unleashed my spiritual sense, expanding it to its limit to envelop the small vial in my hand. Under the scrutiny of my superior spiritual awareness, the internal structure of the vial was laid bare, etched clearly within my mind. My expression darkened instantly. Hidden beneath the seemingly simple cork, I discovered a mechanism connected to an incredibly fine thread. One end of the thread was anchored to a microscopic trap at the base, directed precisely toward the vial's opening. This meant that the moment I withdrew the stopper, the mechanism would be triggered. The trap at the bottom would instantly generate immense pressure, forcing a jet of toxic liquid to spray directly into my face. This was a death trap, a ruthless ploy designed to ensnare whoever dared to open it. Had I opened it without such precautions, even if I were a third-rank expert, and even with the protection of my iron body technique, being doused with toxic fluid at such point-blank range, there would be 10 parts death and not a shred of hope for survival. Curse you, old Chuyushan, curse you, father. Although I had long since ceased to harbor any expectations of him, I never imagined he would act with such lethal cruelty. This was no assassination mission. He had sent me to my grave intending to trade my life for Suwugan's. It would complete the task assigned to Xiao Yichen, while simultaneously severing. Truly, this was a case of killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Suwuken, confined within his cell, had perhaps finally perceived the strange transformation within me. His eyes flickered with suspicion. What is the matter? Are you afraid? Or perhaps you have already caught the scent of impending danger? I took a deep breath. Suppressing the raging fire of fury in my chest, I looked at Su Wuchen and let out a sneer. I had intended to grant you a swift end to set you free, didn't I? But today I have changed my mind. Without further ado, I did not bother to unstop the bottle. Instead, I hurled the vial directly through the iron bars, smashing it violently against the towering stone wall behind Su Wuchen. Simultaneously, I retreated in haste. In the blink of an eye, I had pulled back to the threshold of the cell and slammed the heavy iron door shut with all my might. Bang! A crisp, shattering sound echoed, disturbing the silence of the dungeon. The silver vial struck the stone wall and exploded into 100 fragments. The elixir within did not merely evaporate like a whisper of Su Wuchen's despair. On the contrary, it acted like a corrosive acid. The moment it touched the air, it transformed into a sinister, eerie green bone-melting toxin. It rapidly expanded, consuming the entire space of the small cell. Suokin let out a wail of agony that pierced the ears. The toxic fog did not merely corrode his physical flesh, it burrowed deep, ruthlessly tearing at his very soul. The heterodox cultivation techniques that he had once arrogantly prided himself upon suddenly became worthless trash in the face of this poison designed to suppress cultivators. He could only stare with wide, bloodshot eyes as his skin began to liquefy. A blood-red mist rose as he dissolved. I stood firmly anchored outside the iron bars. Quietly, I narrowed my eyes, watching the performance unfold through the gaps. As for the venomous curses and spiteful words spewing from Su Wuchen, I did not spare them a single thought. There are many outside who would delight in skinning me alive and drinking my blood. What does one more enemy matter? It took the time it takes to brew a cup of tea for his struggles to cease. The shrieks from within finally faded into a heavy, lingering silence. Suwukin had now been reduced to a puddle of vile, viscous fluid. Just as Suwukin's soul scattered and he met his definitive end, the surge of energy I had been waiting for so patiently finally manifested. My mission now is to return and present that ghost fire father of mine with a truly shocking surprise. Under the torrential rain, the Sioux Manor appeared cold, steeped in a profound and desolate silence. The lanterns hanging before the gates swayed violently, battered by the relentless wind. The guards at the gate cast a glance my way as I returned home. Their gazes were marked by a strange, bewildered stupor. It seemed none of them expected that I would manage to drag my life back home. I chose to ignore their bizarre behavior. With measured, arrogant strides, I headed straight for the inner study. Suyushan was sitting there in wait, acting as if he were holding court, or rather he was waiting for the news of my demise. The study door was left ajar. Through the gap the candlelight flickered, casting a murky, dim glow. I shoved the door open and stepped inside. Immediately the faint scent of sandalwood teased my nostrils. Suyushan was seated grandly behind his desk, leafing through a volume on military strategy, appearing on the surface to be deep in contemplation. However, his slightly trembling fingertips betrayed the inner turmoil and anxiety he harbored. Upon seeing me suddenly appear, Suyushan froze in momentary shock, a flash of astonishment and panic darting through his eyes. Yet he masterfully masked his emotions, causing them to vanish instantly. He tossed the military manual onto the desk. He cast a sharp, cold gaze toward me, asking if the task had been completed successfully. Once everything was settled, I casually pulled up an armchair and seated myself. I crossed my legs, lounging with indifference as I stared at this father of mine in name only. Su Wu Yin has ceased breathing. He has truly ascended, his very bones reduced to a puddle of sludge. A flicker of triumphant pleasure gleamed in Su Yushin's eyes. Yet in an instant, his expression turned dark and grim. Did you use that vial of poison? I used it. It was remarkably effective. It very nearly sent me on a journey to the underworld as well. I let out a mocking laugh, staring intensely at him. A gift from my esteemed father. Truly, it is a product of superior quality. Su Yushin's face stiffened. He slammed his hand against the table with a thunderous bang, roaring in a fit of rage. If you haven't spoken up, it only means your fortune is vast. It is one thing to be ungrateful and lack any sense of duty. Yet you have the audacity to stand here and spew such insolent nonsense. Do you even truly grasp the gravity of this situation? Can you comprehend the immense risks the family has had to endure for your sake? I laughed aloud. The laughter was tinged with profound tragedy and biting irony. So the risk to the family involves sacrificing the lives of their own kin? In your eyes, Suo Yoshan, does anything exist beyond your eldest son and the prestige of this family? Are the lives of your own flesh and blood truly as worthless as blades of grass to you? You insolent brat, I am your biological father. My decree is the very truth of the heavens. Forcing you to meet your end is a gesture of favor, allowing you to perish in service to the clan. That is your honor. Suo Yoshin no longer bothered to hide his true colors, discarding his hypocritical mask, rising to his feet to spit vitriol and curse at me in a frenzied rage. Guards, drag him down for me. Enforce the family laws. At his command, two dark figures lunged from behind the study screen. These were the hidden assassins cultivated by the Suo clan, 2 experts at the 3rd grade. It seems you had been lying in wait, ready to uproot me and strike me down from the very start. I remained composed on my seat, not shifting even a single centimeter. I merely cast a glance at the 2 assassins closing in, my eyes flickering with a hint of pity. How amateurish. Just as their 2 poisoned daggers were about to graze me, I executed my strike without any superfluous or flashy movements, simply delivering 2 straight, precise punches. Boom, boom. 2 heavy, resounding impacts rang out clearly. Those 2 third-grade assassins could not even muster a scream before they were sent flying backward at a terrifying speed, far faster than they had approached, slamming directly into the shattered wall. The entire study was instantly plunged into a silence as heavy as a tomb. Suo Yueshan froze, his finger pointing toward me, suspended in midair, while those eyes, that usually shimmered with authority and cold, at this very moment his heart was filled with panic and confusion. How could he have hidden his true capabilities for so long? Suyeshan let out a trembling breath, instinctively stepping backward as I slowly rose to my full height. The majestic aura radiating from me was no longer suppressed or concealed. It descended like the weight of Mount Tai, bearing down heavily upon Suyoshin. Hardly great, father. I never once hid anything. You simply never bothered to look me in the eye, not even once. With every step I took forward, Suyueshin retreated in kind, until he had nowhere left to run, collapsing weakly into his Grand Master chair. What are you planning to do? I am your father. Are you going to commit patricide, you rebellious son? Ignoring his pleas, I walked up to his desk. I slammed both hands onto the table, leaning over to cast my shadow upon him, staring him down with oppressive intensity. Are you worthy? Are you even worthy of being a father? When my mother died, you stood by, watching with cold indifference. And now, it is my turn. Not only did you refuse to offer a helping hand, but you personally delivered poison to your own son. Suyuation, what kind of stone is that heart of yours carved from? You rebellious wretch. Even if you have mastered a few trivial martial arts, so what? I am the current master of the Su family, a title bestowed upon me by the imperial court. If you kill me, you will be branded a traitor, inviting total annihilation upon yourself. The Prince of Anne's estate will never tolerate a man who murders his own father. I burst into laughter, a bitter mocking and sardonic sound. Who said I intended to kill you? To take your life only to bear the wretched stigma of patricide? That would be a foolish trade indeed. Then, what are you planning? A glimmer of hope flickered within Su Yueshan's chest, believing that as long as he survived, he might find a sliver of opportunity to turn the tables. Nothing of the sort. I simply wish for you, father, to abdicate your position and step down. I pulled a shimmering black medicinal pill from my robes and flicked my finger, sending it flying precisely into Su Yoshan's throat. This was a poison I had retrieved from the corpse of Su Wuchen. Though it lacked the lethal brutality of the 7 kill wind, it was more than enough to ensure that the rest of your life will be spent confined to a bed. Rest assured, you won't be meeting your ancestors just yet. You will simply be left paralyzed, unable to speak, unable to cry out. Cough! Cough! Su Yueshan panicked, frantically trying to cough the pill back out. However, the medicinal pill vanished instantly, melting upon contact with his tongue. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a searing heat, flooding through his entire body. The old man felt his limbs go numb and unresponsive, his tongue turning so stiff and rigid he could barely move it. You detestable beast! Su Yueshan's eyes bulged wide and bloodshot, as he glared at me with a gaze brimming with bottomless resentment, hatred, and agonizing frustration. From this day forward, the Suo family will be under my command. Spread the word to the world. Our honorable family head has fallen gravely ill, stricken by a sudden affliction brought on by overexertion and exhaustion, and is now confined to his bed in need of absolute rest. As for my eldest brother, I shall personally send someone to deliver the tragic news. Tell him to abandon his wandering dreams and stay where he is, for it would be unwise for him to foolishly risk his life by returning here, lest I feel compelled to send him to reunite with the old woman in the afterlife. Without sparing another glance at Suo Yoshan's maddened, twisted expression, I turned on my heel and strode out of the study with an air of absolute authority. Outside, a light drizzle continued to fall, yet I felt a sense of liberation and ease unlike anything I had ever known. It was as if a heavy boulder, one that had weighed upon my heart for over a decade, had finally been cast aside. In the following days, the internal chaos of the Suo family erupted like a storm, shaking the very foundations of the estate. The family head, Suo Yueshan, had fallen victim to a sudden chronic illness. Left partially paralyzed and unable to manage affairs, he had no choice but to entrust the temporary control of the family to his second son, Suo Qingyun. Initially, a few elders and stewards attempted to jump forward, voicing their dissent and rejecting the decision. However, through my swift and ruthless displays of power, every dissenting voice was silenced, dissolving into a deathly, fearful quiet. Those who refused to submit were struck down until they knew their place. Any who dared to plot in the shadows were immediately seized and cast into the deepest dungeons. Faced with absolute strength and unyielding authority, all their petty schemes and cowardly machinations proved to be nothing more than paper tigers. In a mere 3 days of decisive maneuvering, I had brought the entire Suo family firmly under my control. After the rain, the sky cleared brilliantly, a vast rainbow arching across the horizon. Only a short month remained before the day I was to enter the Jing'an Prince Manor as a son-in-law. Yet my state of mind had undergone a complete and fundamental transformation. Previously, the plan to marry into the manor was merely a desperate attempt to secure a path for survival. But now, entering the manor felt more like obtaining a pass to venture out and witness the vastness of the world beyond. The princess of the Jing'an Prince's manor, and that renowned demon suppression envoy mentioned in the ancient legends, awaited. It seems the waters of Kanglan City run far deeper and more treacherous than I had initially imagined. But what does it matter if they are deep? As long as lives are lost, I shall only grow stronger. Beneath this vast expanse of heaven and earth, there will certainly be a path of glory and stability for me, Suo Qingyun. I lightly brushed my hand against the storage ring at my waist, where the cultivation manual titled Immortal Martial Dual Cultivation, a spoils of war scavenged from the corpse of Xiao Jian, lay hidden. Perhaps that is the true turning point.